Poetry, an introduction by Mrs. Sample, makes a noble attempt at educating her audience about poetry basics. However, the coherence principle discussed in Clark and Mayer's third edition of e-learning and the science of instruction is challenged on each of her 13 slides. Essentially, the coherence principle is the avoidance of extra material, be it text, graphics, or background music, that does not add to student learning. Adhering to the coherence principle is especially important for low knowledge learners, which in Miss Sample's case seems to be her target audience, with the title Poetry and Introduction. Unfortunately, her fatal flaw is her use of extraneous background and unrelated images. As you can see, as I click through, she has used a crayon background that has nothing to do with the subject content of poetry. She has also used a bunch of different images that do not relate to the content of poetry. For instance, this New Yorker image, what does this have to do with anything about a speaker? Especially when she gives the example or the notation that the speaker of the poem is the voice that relates to the story or idea of the poem. This image has nothing to do with what she has written here. In addition, sound. What was the need in placing a double image version of the title Sound? Then, too, the sound image is followed up with a picture of the Pink Panther playing a saxophone. She continues for the rest of her slides with images that really have nothing to do with what her content is all about. This imagery image offers nothing about sight, hearing, smell, taste, or touch. Figurative language is another one. An image of a dragon has nothing to do with figurative language and/or is not completely understood. Thus, as I conclude Ms. Sample's image or presentation, I would like to show you one that I've done in revision to what she has posted here. So here is my poetry, a reintroduction. The explanation, key elements of poetry, forms. This image in particular shows a picture of a poem, but also what this image is relating to as far as the text is concerned. So the whole poem, how it looks on the page, how poems are written in lines, and how lines are grouped in stanzas. If you remember, Miss Sample's image did not do anything of the sort in detailing the explanation that was provided in text. Continuing through my presentation, you'll notice that I left out quite a few images where Miss Sample chose to include them. I really found it only relevant to include images that had something to do with the content of what was presented on the screen. So for instance, under Imagery, where it talks about the 5 sentences, I've used Microsoft Clip Art to present these 5 senses: eyes for sight, ears for sound, a nose for smell, hands for touch, and a mouth for taste. It's simple for a viewer of this presentation to see what the actual words correlate with if they were unsure from before. For figurative language, if you remember, Miss Sample had a dragon posted on her presentation. I instead have chose to use the example, she is happy as a clown, which features an image of a little girl in comparison to a clown, to make the correlation between expresses more than literal meaning as figurative language. Concluding the presentation is a simple graphic with the words "The End," and of course a reference page. It's my hope that after viewing my presentation of a reintroduction to poetry and seeing how I've removed unnecessary images, or weeded out as Clark and Mayer termed it, you'll understand more what the coherence principle is all about, and thus take this into account when creating presentations in the future.